Okay, you're on. Start talking. That's great.
Natalynn was just 3 years old, bright, full of energy, and always smiling. She was too young to understand the danger around her, too small to protect herself. All she wanted was to play, to feel safe, to be loved. But instead, she was caught in a situation no child should ever have to endure. On Sunday, March 22, 2009, Nicole Lee had a busy day ahead. She had errands to run, things to take care of, but something didn't feel right. A strange unease settled in her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite shake. She thought back to how different life had been just a few years ago. She had met Troy Miller in 2000, and in the summer of 2005, they welcomed their daughter, Natalynn Lee Miller, a beautiful, blue-eyed little girl who was always cheerful and easygoing. Those were the good times. But life had a way of shifting. Nicole and Troy separated before Natalynn even turned 2. It felt surreal, standing together at her birthday party, holding the cake as if nothing had changed, as if they were still a family. But they weren't. Their love had faded, and all that remained was the shared responsibility of raising their daughter. Over time, Nicole moved on. She dated, but nothing lasted. Then, in the fall of 2008, she met Ryan Jones. He was charming, attentive, the man who made her believe in love again. At first, everything seemed perfect, but lately things had started to unravel. Ryan's temper flared too often. His patience wore thin. There were moments when he would lash out, always followed by excuses. "I didn't mean to," he'd say. "It was an accident." And yet, there were too many of those accidents. Too many times when Natalynn ended up hurt. Nicole's friends had noticed. They voiced their concerns, gently questioning if she was making the right choices. But Nicole wasn't a bad mother. At least that's what she told herself. Natalynn was just clumsy, always running around, never sitting still. That's what she needed to believe. Then came the phone call. "Miss Lee, this is Detective Jared Hughes. Please come to Cahuilla Health Medical Center. I'm sorry, but your daughter Natalynn has passed away." It's truly heartwarming to see our community of compassionate people grow every day. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far our voices reach. And if you'd like to help support the channel and continue spreading awareness about important issues, consider subscribing. Thank you for being a part of our channel. Now, let's get back to Natalynn's story. Natalynn was a bright, joyful child whose laughter could light up even the darkest days. She had a way of making people around her feel warm and loved. From the moment she was born, she brought incredible happiness to her parents. Her older half-brother Curtis adored her. To him, she wasn't just a little sister. She was his best friend, his favorite playmate. The two of them were inseparable. She loved being outside, whether she was swinging at the park, going for walks, or simply running around, soaking in the world around her. Every small moment was an adventure to her. From the time she could walk, she had a special bond with animals. She learned to take her first steps by holding onto the family dog's back, and she carried that love for animals with her as she grew. Visiting the zoo was one of her favorite things. She loved pony rides and petting the animals, her eyes lighting up with excitement. One of the most precious things she owned was a plush bunny her father had given her. She never went anywhere without it. It wasn't just a toy. It was a symbol of his love, something that made her feel safe and comforted no matter where she was. Like many kids, she had favorite things. Her favorite food was pizza, something she could happily eat every day. Her favorite color was pink, the color of joy, warmth, and all the things she loved. Natalynn had a creative, imaginative spirit. She loved dressing up in pretty dresses, pretending she was a princess in a fairy tale world where kindness always triumphed. She also loved to sing. Her little voice, full of warmth and innocence, would fill the room whenever she sang for her family. They often dreamed she'd grow up to be a singer one day. Most of all, she loved spending time with her dad. Some of their best memories together were trips to the water park, where they'd spend hours laughing, playing, and enjoying the rides. He gave her everything he could, making the most of every moment they had together. Looking back, it was almost as if he knew things would soon change. Unfortunately, just before Natalynn's second birthday, her parents separated. Despite the change, they still came together for a family celebration on her birthday. Little Natalynn, still so young, couldn't yet grasp the huge shift that was about to turn her world upside down. After the split, Nicole and Natalynn moved in with a friend, Jessica Rosales. Troy made sure to spend time with his daughter, seeing her every other weekend and on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Eventually, Troy rented a house of his own in Chile. In the fall of 2008, Natalynn started mentioning a new man in her mother's life. Someone she called Riri. It didn't take long for Troy to learn that Nicole was seeing Ryan Jones. At first, Natalynn didn't express any strong feelings about him. But things began to change. By October 2008, Troy noticed something troubling: bruises and injuries on Natalynn. She complained of pain, and when she showed her father how she was hurt, she said that Ryan had been fighting with her. Seeing his little girl in pain, Troy was furious. When he touched the bruise, Natalynn flinched in obvious agony. The bruises were brown and seemed to be a few days old. Troy immediately called Nicole, voicing his concerns. Nicole dismissed him, insisting that Natalynn and Ryan were simply playing. But Troy, not satisfied with this explanation, told her that if Ryan couldn't control his strength while playing with a child, then they needed to stop. Nicole's response was cold, telling him to stay out of her life. As time went on, Troy noticed more troubling signs. Natalynn had small red bumps and bruises on her buttocks, which didn't make sense to him since she'd been potty trained since she was 2. When he gently asked her about it, she became upset and refused to talk. Nicole claimed that Natalynn had soiled herself, but Troy wasn't convinced. Later, in October, Troy noticed knuckle marks on Natalynn's chest. She told him that Ryan had fought her, again mimicking the actions of a fight with her little hands. Then, Natalynn told him something that chilled him to the bone. She said Ryan had thrown her into the safety sink. She acted out the throwing motion, showing him how it happened. When Troy confronted Nicole about the incident, she dismissed it, saying that Natalynn had simply spun around and fell into the box by accident. In December 2008, Troy saw a red mark on Natalynn's right shoulder blade. She told him she had fallen off her bike while with Ryan, but Troy was beginning to notice a pattern, and the explanations didn't add up. Unfortunately, despite his growing concerns, Troy never reached out to the police or Child Protective Services. For a brief period in February 2009, Natalynn seemed happier. She stopped mentioning Ryan, and Troy thought maybe things were improving. During this time, Nicole and Ryan had split up, but Troy didn't know that Ryan had actually moved in with them again when they moved into a new apartment in March 2009. On March 18, 2009, Nicole called Troy and told him she would bring Natalynn over for the day. After spending time with her father, Natalynn said something that broke Troy's heart. She wanted to live with him and didn't want to stay with Nicole anymore. Later that evening, Nicole sent Troy a text asking if Natalynn could stay the night with him. Troy, of course, said yes. Natalynn was overjoyed. That evening, Troy helped her take a bath, and he noticed there were no new injuries. The next morning, on March 19th, Natalynn begged her father to let her stay with him. When Nicole arrived to pick her up, Natalynn ran and hid, not wanting to leave. After a few moments, Troy gently picked her up and placed her in Nicole's car. As he kissed her goodbye, Natalynn refused to look at him, crying the entire time. Tragically, that would be the last time Troy would see his daughter alive. On Sunday evening, March 22, 2009, at 5:41 p.m., 911 received a distress call. Detective 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞 from the 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞 Police Department arrived at the scene just 2 minutes later, where he saw a man, Ryan, rushing into the street, holding a limp child in his arms. Sergeant Randy Lenzner arrived around the same time. Detective Hughes instructed that the child be placed on the grass so he could assess the situation. Natalyn's skin was cold to the touch, and her color was ghostly white. There was no pulse, and she appeared lifeless. Detective Hughes immediately checked her airway, tilting her head back to clear her throat. Sergeant Lenzner applied a breathing mask and managed to give her a breath, watching as Natalyn's chest rose slightly. They felt for a weak pulse, but found none, so they refrained from chest compressions. Within minutes, paramedics arrived and took over the efforts to save her life. Detective Hughes spoke briefly with Ryan and began inspecting the apartment. He and Ryan followed the ambulance to the hospital. As they drove, Hughes noted that most of Natalyn's clothing had been removed. Bruises marked her chest, forehead, the back of her ears, right shoulder, her back, wrists, knees, inner thighs, and even her left nostril. The detective knew instantly that this wasn't an accident. Yet, at that moment, the priority was trying to save Natalyn's life. Despite the paramedics' desperate efforts, at 6:13 p.m., Natalynn was pronounced dead. Dr. Sane, who attended to her, confirmed that the extent of her injuries was too severe for the paramedics to have any chance of saving her. She explained that the bruising couldn't have been caused by any accidental trauma. Natalyn's body was sent for a full examination. Detective Hughes called Nicole Lee with the tragic news, as Ryan had not made the call himself. When Hughes inquired about what had happened to Natalynn, Ryan simply said she had been eating pizza in her room and showed no interest in elaborating. Hughes didn't push further, knowing that Ryan would be questioned at the station soon. Nicole, too, could barely find the courage to call Troy. Instead, it was her mother who called him, delivering the heart-wrenching news that his daughter had passed away at the hospital after eating a piece of pizza. In disbelief, Troy rushed to the hospital where Detective Hughes showed him Natalyn's lifeless body. The grief was overwhelming. Troy was inconsolable, sobbing uncontrollably. He repeatedly said, "She's been killed." The detective noted how different the reactions were from everyone else. Ryan seemed distant, and Nicole was terrified, but it was Troy, the father, whose grief was raw and genuine. The following 2 days were filled with investigations. The apartment was thoroughly searched, witnesses were interviewed, and the results of the autopsy were reviewed. On March 25, 2009, after being questioned by the police, Ryan Jones was arrested. Natalynn Miller was laid to rest on March 27, following a service at Sulzer and Dillard Funeral Chapel in Visalia. The Miller family was consumed by grief, as was the community, who came together to pay their respects and offer support during such a heartbreaking time. When the trial of Ryan Jones began, one of the key witnesses was Jessica Rosales, a close friend of Nicole and Natalynn. Jessica had known Natalynn since birth and had been like a second mother to her. She first met Nicole and Troy in 2001, and she began noticing signs of abuse after Nicole started dating Ryan. In 2008, she observed bruises and cuts on Natalynn, including a bruised cheek. Initially, Natalynn said she was with Ryan when she got hurt, but later admitted she couldn't remember how it happened. In December 2008, Jessica saw that Natalynn's lip was swollen, but Natalynn refused to explain what had happened, saying that her mother would be angry. By February 2009, Jessica noticed that Natalynn's ears were red and crusty. Natalynn told Jessica that she and Ryan had been playing roughly, but Nicole later confided in Jessica that Ryan had burned Natalynn's ears with a blow-dryer. Worried about Natalynn's well-being, Jessica took her to a clinic, where medical staff identified the ear injuries as fresh wounds and also noted a wound on her shoulder. Natalynn appeared frightened and couldn't explain how the injuries had occurred. Jessica witnessed several instances where Nicole would force Natalynn to go to Ryan's house, even though Natalynn would cry and call him a monster. In March, Nicole and Natalynn moved into an apartment with Ryan. On March 7th, Ryan brought Natalynn to Jessica's house with a large bruise on her head, claiming she had fallen from her crib. Natalynn seemed lethargic, but Nicole discouraged Jessica from taking her to the hospital. Jessica was increasingly concerned about Natalynn's safety and offered to care for her until the family moved to Texas. On March 20th, Jessica took Natalynn to a friend's house, but Nicole insisted on picking her up. Jessica argued with Ryan about the bruises, but Nicole defended him, saying that Natalynn was her daughter. Then, on March 23rd, Jessica learned that Natalynn had passed away. When she called Nicole to ask what had happened, Nicole admitted that she hadn't informed Jessica earlier because she feared Jessica would blame Ryan. The police were able to obtain CCTV footage from the McDonald's in 𝐿, and several witnesses who were there that day provided statements. They described a pattern of abuse: Ryan yelling at Natalynn while she appeared frightened, and Nicole sitting silently, not intervening. Investigators later obtained recordings of phone conversations between Ryan and Nicole while he was in jail. These recordings were played in court for the jury, and a transcript was provided. In their first conversation, Nicole spoke about Natalynn's funeral, a service Ryan could not attend due to his arrest. Nicole shared her sorrow for him and reassured him that everyone was supporting him. Throughout their talks, Nicole repeatedly told Ryan she loved him, expressing her sympathy for the hardships he was facing. In their second conversation, she again declared her love. By the third, they discussed Nicole's upcoming visit to Ryan in jail, with Nicole affirming, "I'm with you 100%. I love you." During the trial, Nicole insisted that Ryan was not responsible for Natalynn's death, maintaining that Ryan loved Natalynn and that she, too, loved him. She recalled instances when Natalynn would fall asleep on Ryan's lap, indicating a bond between them. The autopsy, however, revealed the truth. Natalynn had suffered from sustained physical abuse, with the cause of death being severe blunt force trauma to her head and abdomen. Expert testimonies confirmed that the injuries could not have been accidental, but were the result of violent actions. The abuse was consistent and intentional. It became clear that Nicole, though aware of the abuse, did little to stop it. She seemed more concerned with hiding it than protecting her daughter. 5 months after Natalynn's death, Nicole was arrested and charged with felony child endangerment, resulting in her daughter's death. The trial was lengthy, but in May 2014, Nicole Lee was sentenced to 8 years in prison for child endangerment that led to Natalynn's murder. She was handcuffed and taken into custody to serve her sentence. Ryan Jones's trial concluded in December 2013, where he was convicted of second-degree murder for the fatal beating of Natalynn. The judge sentenced him to 25 years to life in prison for child abuse resulting in death. Troy Miller, Natalynn's father, attended both trials. The loss of his daughter and the haunting question of whether he could have done more to save her weighed heavily on his heart. Since then, Troy has become a prominent advocate for child abuse awareness. Our deepest condolences to the family of Natalynn. May her soul rest in peace.